Hey, RetconRaider here. Now, it's been quite a while since the last time we talked about a crowdfunding campaign. That's not to say that I stopped backing crowdfunders, just more to say that I got a little preoccupied with some of my many other projects. That said, today I thought we'd rectify that problem by taking a look at one of the most promising campaigns that I recently decided to back. Today, I thought we'd talk about Vagrus, the Riven Realms, by Lost Pilgrims Studio. So, what is Vagrus? Well, Vagrus is a fascinating hybrid between a trade simulation game and an exploration-based RPG. It seems to draw heavy inspiration from games like Sunless Sea, 80 Days, and even Darkest Dungeon. Thematically, it also draws inspiration from a variety of classic fantasy settings, including the early works of Steve Jackson and Ian Livingstone, classic D&D settings such as Dark Sun, Ravenloft, and Planescape, and, of course, the classic works of J.R.R. Tolkien. The game takes place in the titular Riven Realms, the ruins of the proud and prosperous continent of Zerreen. Once dominated by the Old Empire, it enjoyed a millennia of peace and prosperity, much of it beneath the dutiful rule of the so-called Immortal Emperor. Thought to be a descendant of the gods himself, the Emperor began to withdraw from public affairs towards the end of the Third Age, and in his absence, the empire he had once led slowly grew corrupted. Greed and ambition soon drove the empire to civil war, as feuding factions fought for both power and resources. Though the emperor himself was nowhere to be seen, his followers claimed to be serving the will of the gods, even in the face of evidence to the contrary. As more and more atrocities were performed in their names, the old pantheon of Zerreen grew increasingly enraged, and finally, with the genocide of Varan, a particularly rebellious island kingdom, the gods descended upon the empire to punish those who used their names in vain. The Golden Age came crashing to a bloody halt, as the gods rained ruin indiscriminately across the entire continent. In an instant, entire cities were wiped off the map, engulfed in darkness, overrun by hideous beasts, or simply obliterated by earthquakes or meteor storms. While the cataclysm may have been intended to simply punish the Empire for their hubris, it had clearly gotten well out of hand. When the dust finally settled, all of Zerreen had been devastated, and over 70% of the population lay dead. The gods themselves looked on in horror at what they had wrought upon their creation, and forever withdrew from the once glorious realm. In their absence, new gods arose, many of them dark and cruel, feeding on the suffering that their predecessors had caused. Reality itself was ruptured, allowing demons, dragons, and even more monstrous things to flood into their world. Vagrus takes place over 1,000 years later, in a world that is yet to recover from the devastation that was unleashed upon it. It's a bleak, post-apocalyptic setting, built around the ruins of the once mighty empire. A world that may have started as a Tolkien-esque fantasy setting, but which is now intermingled with ancient curses and otherworldly horrors that have turned it into a perpetually nightmarish hellscape. In this setting, the player is thrust into the role of a Vagrus, an aspiring trader and explorer who must take control of a modestly equipped caravan and eke out a living in this ruined world. They're tasked with hiring, equipping, and managing their caravan, then navigating their way between the last pockets of civilization, carrying goods across the blasted and monster-infested wastelands. In doing so, they will also be presented with numerous opportunities to learn more about the world around them, both providing them a chance to amass even greater riches, but also to potentially alleviate at least some of the suffering that the cataclysm has caused. From a gameplay standpoint, Vagrus is equal parts simulation and RPG. While it will include a fairly in-depth trading and caravan management system, it will also be built around the idea of discovering and exploring stories about this war-torn world. Trading and survival are both meant to be prominent parts of the game, but they're simply intended to facilitate things like exploration and discovery. While basic commerce may allow the player to maintain their caravan and bring in a steady but modest source of income, the player will need to resort to much more ambitious measures if they truly want to thrive. This will encourage the player to visit many of the Riven Realms' most bizarre and inhospitable regions. Every location, no matter how remote, will have something new to offer, as well as events to encounter and opportunities to exploit. In the course of this exploration, the player will be confronted with many difficult decisions, each of which will draw them deeper into the game's complex, branching narrative. These decisions will ultimately shape their character's story, including the ambitions that drive them, the friends and enemies that they make, and the mark that they will leave on the Riven Realms. Allying with a faction, for example, may provide any number of benefits, including things like specialty equipment or better trading prices, though it will often come at the cost of making new enemies. In some cases, it may even result in gaining access to special companions, NPCs that can serve as deputies for the player's caravan. This includes a wide variety of colorful and often untrustworthy characters, such as Krifta the mutant archer, Garrick the dwarven smuggler, Renkelon the mysterious dark elf, and even Vorax, the gluttonous undead quartermaster. Unlike the faceless and expendable guards and laborers that make up most of the player's caravan, these deputies will impart special modifiers to the caravan as a whole. Different characters will offer different bonuses. Some, for example, will make it easier to negotiate better deals or to pack extra supplies. Others might extend the caravan's daily movement range or make it easier to detect nearby encounters. And all companions will rush to the caravan's defense, should it ever come under attack. Each of these companions will also come with their own unique stories to explore, as well as additional special opportunities to exploit. While they can gain levels over time, further improving their skills and abilities, their story must be advanced to raise them above certain built-in level caps. While these stories will grant the player even greater opportunities and more powerful companions, much like the branching narrative, they'll also come at a cost, blocking off certain other opportunities. For example, choosing to associate with a criminal or escaped slave may result in conflict with their enemies, or even just the local authorities. Likewise, recruiting a mutant or demonkin may provide an ally with unique and invaluable abilities, but may also result in being shunned or even attacked by those who refuse to associate with such nefarious beings. Many of these conflicts will, of course, result in brutal and unforgiving combat. This is where Vagrus begins to more closely resemble games like Darkest Dungeon. In Vagrus, combat is handled using a fairly conventional turn-based combat system. The concepts are largely familiar. Characters in the front row will protect characters who are directly behind them. Each character will have a small assortment of special attacks and abilities, each with their own targeting parameters and special effects. Throughout a battle, units will often move or be moved all over the grid, and it is vital for the player to take advantage of this, exposing and neutralizing high-priority targets while simultaneously protecting their wounded or more vulnerable units. Different companions will have wildly different abilities. Characters like Goro Goro and Skornar, for example, are powerful frontline combatants, while characters like Krifta the Archer or Garrick the Smuggler prefer to hang back, firing from the safety of the second row. Similarly, some characters like Vorax or Jarvek are almost purely support characters, designed to buff your allies or distract your foes. It's up to the player to decide the best combination of companions to fit their personal preferred playstyle. Of course, it is important to remember that Vagrus is designed to be a very unforgiving game. Your crew is ultimately expendable, and badly injured companions can end up crippled or even dead. The Riven Realms are riddled with the bleached bones of numerous, aspiring traders. All it takes is one bad run to ruin an otherwise promising career. Now, like I said, Vagrus is actually in the middle of an extended crowdfunding campaign. It's actually rather unusual in that it's the first ongoing crowdfunder on Fig that doesn't have a hard cutoff date. Instead, it's using an experimental new funding format where the pledges all count towards unlocking additional milestones for the game's core development. Essentially, all the people who pledge to support the project will receive a copy of the game, but the more people that pledge, the bigger and better that game will become. As of this video, the developers have raised roughly $24,000, leaving them just short of their 6th major milestone. If this new goal is reached, then the developers will begin implementing the planned crew combat system, which will allow the player to deploy their much more expendable guards, scouts, and even common laborers against some of the dangers they encounter in the wastes. As with most crowdfunders, pledges come in a wide variety of tiers, with higher tiers offering commensurately greater rewards. The lowest tier, priced at roughly $28, offers little more than a digital game key and immediate access to the alpha build on Discord, while the higher tiers offer all sorts of digital goodies, including the chance to literally leave your mark on the Riven Realms by helping the developers design a specific event, enemy, or even a recruitable companion. While the final game isn't slated for release until sometime in 2020, every tier comes with immediate access to Pilgrims of the Wasteland, a prologue story that takes place roughly 10 years before the main campaign. This guided linear experience serves as both a tutorial as well as a primer for the incredibly rich lore that the developers have already written. It also serves to introduce several of the characters and locations that will appear in the final game, including many of the potential recruitable companions. Personally, I was already sold on the game just by the art and lore alone. The official website already sports over 50 pages of fascinating lore, including 4 short stories set in the Riven Realms. The developers have also released dozens of promotional images, showcasing the wide variety of characters and locations that the player will encounter during their travels. If you think that Vagrus looks like the sort of game that you might enjoy, then I strongly encourage you to go check out the official website and the crowdfunding campaign over on Fig. The developers have actually maintained an admirable amount of communication with their community, so there is a lot of extra information floating around on their websites and social media. For what it's worth, though, I think it's pretty safe to say that if you enjoy games like 80 Days, Sunless Sea, or even A House of Many Doors, then you'll probably end up enjoying Vagrus, the Riven Realms. Of course, you don't have to take my word for it. Like I said, there's no shortage of official updates and videos for you to look at. As always, links are in the description.